for our viewers who aren't familiar with
Sure.
you, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for City Council.
Absolutely. Well, my name's Frank Ward. I'm running in Southwest Austin for the District 8 seat on City Council, and I'm a husband, I'm a father. I work in a small business here in Austin, do public affairs work, and got a long background in government and politics, so a lot of experience at the federal, state, and city level. I'm a Parks and Rec Board Commissioner for the City of Austin. And the reason why I'm running is very simply because I love this city and I see the track we're on, and I feel like, you know, while we have a lot of things going right in Austin, you know, when we talk about keeping Austin weird, and, you know, my slogan, Keep Austin Ward, is really an appeal to that. It's that sense of authenticity. And I think because of the affordability crisis that we're experiencing, we're at a place right now where some of that's being threatened. You've got a lot of families and individuals and businesses who just can't afford to stay here any longer. And I think it's undermining, you know, a lot of what makes Austin Austin. And so that's my big motivation, is wanting to be the voice for all of Austin and fix those issues. And I think ultimately we have a lot of tax and spend policies at City Hall that make things very, very expensive for our residents. And it doesn't matter if you're a renter or a homeowner or a business owner, all of that is expensive. And I think when you look at the $4.1 billion that we're going to be spending in this next budget, we've got to have a better appreciation for whether or not all of that money needs to be spent. And going forward, do our taxes need to continue to raise, or rise, I should say, at the rate they're going?
So when we think about specifically about District 8,
Yes.
what are you feel are the three most pressing issues for the people within that district?
Absolutely. Well, I think taxes, most especially property taxes, are affecting everyone, and, you know, nearly 70% of our residents in Southwest Austin are homeowners. And so people are seeing these year-over-year increases, and as I've said throughout my time on the campaign trail, we're on a trajectory right now, Ashley, where every 9 to 10 years property taxes are slated to double. So if you're paying $8,000 right now, it'll be $16,000 in less than a decade, or $9,000 will be $18,000, $10,000 will be $20,000. And that's just unsustainable. And that it doesn't matter if, you know, you're there and you're taking care of your family with a six-figure salary. I mean, that is a substantial amount of money, and we have a huge property tax burden, not just in the city, but in the state. And one thing I've said is that, you know, and people have rightly pointed out, it isn't just our city taxes, it's also the way school finance works. Our school finance system in the state is broken. One of the chief differences between my opponent and I is that I actually have experience, long experience in government and politics, and you know, especially at the state capitol here in Austin, and I recognize what I think could be fixed. And so people in the district want to see their city taxes, their portion of the city taxes, reduced, because they want to be able to stay here. But they also recognize that when nearly 50 cents on every dollar of theirs doesn't go to AISD but goes to another school district, that is really hard. So first and foremost, it's property taxes. And of course, as I said earlier, that affects renters too, because it's just a built-in sort of rate increase. But then on traffic, you know, 90% of our residents in Southwest Austin drive cars, and we just do not have enough infrastructure to accommodate that. And there are also some smart city solutions that we could take, just the way traffic lights work, the way some of our roads are laid out. But frankly, I think we also just need more infrastructure. You know, thankfully, you know, I mean, we live down in Southwest Austin in the Circle C area, and now there are, you know, some overpasses at Slaughter towards La Crosse, and that project is ongoing. But that's really helped just to alleviate some of the insane traffic we have there. But the Wyatt Oak Hill, you know, people spend a combined 455,000 hours a year just sitting in traffic, languishing, you know, not getting to their jobs as quickly as they could, not getting home on time, and that's a real problem. And so that's a project that needs to be addressed. So I think it's, you know, those two issues, but absolutely public safety too. I mean, we're one of the largest safe cities in America, but as you probably know, because you all have done a good job covering it, I mean, the police contract that wasn't settled for 11 months, even though it's now been resolved, you know, it really came at a price where you've got a lot of police officers who left our department and went to other departments across the state or re-enlisted in the military because they couldn't afford to stay any longer with all the uncertainty around their contract. So, you know, I want to do more to recognize our public, you know, our first responders, and to make sure that public safety is a priority for the city, as it should be.
When we think about affordability,
Yeah.
obviously the city is limited in what it can do because of market forces.
That's right.
As well as some of those issues with the taxes and school finance.
You're very right.
So what things do you think the city can do, and would you like the city to do to have an impact on affordability?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, you make a great point on market forces. I think part of the problem, though, is that we've artificially inflated the market here with some of the tax and spend policies that we've seen at City Hall. And when you put burdens on business, sick leave policy is a good example. I'm all for people having sick leave. I think it's important. But I just don't believe that a mandate can be demanded of small businesses by a government. That's just not the role of government. And that creates huge cost on business owners, which subsequently can hurt employees. So I think a lot of what I'm looking at is how the policies that are coming out of City Hall are costing the job creators and subsequently having an adverse effect on employees across the city. There are other policies like that have a great cost to them. And for instance, some of these bonds that went through, affordable housing, we absolutely need more of it. But the reason why that bond even needed to go is because, in part, you're exactly right. The market forces are such that it's supply and demand. People want to be here. We have a need for more housing, and yet, I think the policies have driven up values in an artificial way because everything's become more expensive. The regulations alone. I mean, that's another chief tenet of my campaign: is how do we fight expensive and unnecessary overregulation of businesses? I mean, there are home builders that won't even build here anymore because the cost is so great. And again, when the cost is great for them, it gets passed on to the homeowner, and so it's a vicious cycle. And so this affordability crisis is really the goal that I have to tackle. I want to tackle that affordability crisis.
When you think about transportation,
sure.
Obviously TxDOT is who gets to decide to expand,
sure.
Our freeways and our roads and things of that nature. So what things do you think the city can do to have an impact on alleviating our traffic congestion
sure.
and our traffic issues?
Well, it's another great point. I think we've got to work more with our regional partners. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, there of course are things we can do locally, like I said, just with city streets within downtown and just going north, south, east, and west. There are absolutely things the city has a responsibility for and can do more of. But I think we need to have greater county and state partnerships, even federal partnerships on road projects. I mean, we've got some of the most oppressive congestion in the state, if not the nation, and it has a huge cost. I mean, just the cost of productivity alone is such that it has to be dealt with. And I think some of it actually is we just have to get smart about, or even acknowledge the fact that people still drive their cars. And I'm all for sort of the all of the above approach to traffic solutions. If there are mass transit solutions that are efficient and affordable, then let's look at them. But I think it's worth noting, there's a study that came out this summer that showed that more people now telecommute in this country than even utilize public transit. And so you've got to look at not spending potentially billions more on a transportation boondoggle that would be underutilized, that would just cost the taxpayers more and really not alleviate the traffic that we have on our roads.
When you think about small businesses in the city, I don't think we hear about it as much as small businesses closing and being forced out
sure.
in District 8 as we do other parts of the city. It does happen, though.
Yeah.
And so what things do you think the city can do to help preserve those small businesses, especially since those are some of the things and the factors that make Austin, Austin?
Yeah, it's a really good question. First and foremost, let's listen to our businesses. I think that is just, and for that matter, let's listen to our citizens. I think when you look, for instance, again, at the sick leave policy, I mean, it was absolutely clear that the vast majority of small business owners in the city were not in favor of that. And it's because there are unintended consequences. Anytime you push for, for instance, when you talk about a living wage, I think we're all for people having greater opportunity and wanting to make more so that they can live here. But when it's not market driven and it's a force of government, it has often unintended consequences that end up affecting employees. And so with small businesses, let's not force policies on them that are going to ultimately drive costs up for them that could put them out of business and thus mean that a lot of employees are not able to have the jobs that they have right now. You think about Manchac, for instance, and the road name change, and obviously for right now there's a stay on that. But more than 80% of business owners on Manchac Road didn't want the name of the spelling of the street to change, and it didn't matter. Council just went ahead and said, well, we're going to do that anyway. And that may seem like a small example, but repeatedly, you have that. There's another thing that may be coming up called predictive scheduling that tries to force on restaurant owners and other businesses that ultimately cater to people, to people who live here in Austin, to tourists and others, to say you basically have to guarantee hours for employees. So if you're a restaurant and you've got a banquet and it gets canceled, well, you're not getting that income now, but you're still going to have to pay your employees for that work that they're not able to do anymore. It's just, we've got to get out of la la land and start focusing on the real issues that affect real people. There is a consequence when people, when we make decisions at City Hall and we force bad policies on individuals and families and businesses. There's a cost. And the cost is potentially that we're driving out some of our best talent, and we've got to do a better job of, like you said, we want to preserve what makes Austin Austin. And I think if we listen more to our citizens and we listen more to the people who live here and make Austin weird and wonderful, we're going to be in a better spot.
I'm sure you are familiar with the study that UT did several years ago that came out and found, or excuse me, it was not a UT study, but UT kind of played off of the study that said Austin was the most economically segregated city in the United States. Anecdotally, we constantly hear that West Austin, Southwest Austin are the areas that aren't diverse, that don't have affordable housing projects and things of those natures, and yet those are high opportunity areas. Do you see a need for more diversity within District 8, and if so, how do you achieve it?
Well, I think when we talk about that, I'm for more opportunity for everyone. I mean, you think about the economic segregation that's taking place, socioeconomic segregation that's taking place in East Austin as about, as a matter of just poor decision making when you think about what was Central Avenue. And when 35, came in and it basically cut off a very important part, historically and otherwise, a region of our city, we need to find ways to reconnect and, better, bring together our city. So I think that you also have to look at just the way in which, when you talk about affordability, I mean, there are a lot of things that you have to look at. Actually, can you ask me that question?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. No problem. So I think the point that we were getting at is people talk about a lack of diversity within District 8, West Austin. So that kind of that whole, west of Mopac, a lack of diversity.
And do we just mean racial, socioeconomic?
Racial, socioeconomic, educational. I mean, they say that there's a certain type of person who lives in West Austin. Do you see a need for more diversity within the district, and if so, how do we achieve it?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, if we are able to, one, look at school finance, I was just talking about that earlier. If we were able to bring, many hundreds of millions of dollars back into AISD, I mean, you hear about how our local schools now are losing students, so there's an opportunity deficit there. I mean, I think that alone would help to create greater diversity in our schools and create greater opportunity in areas, because why do a lot of families choose to live where they live? They do it because of, the schools. And, if they're good schools, they want to be there. And I think that, you've hit on something, which is, depending on where you are in the city, the schools may have a greater reputation, or there may be, greater desire to be there. And so I would look first and foremost at how do we bring some of that education funding back to Austin. I think that would have a huge effect. But again, as you've said, some of it is just market-based. And I think we've got to look at, are there policies out of City Hall that may be trying to help but are actually hurting, the way in which our city is developing? And, how do we maybe get out of our own way and just let things, I feel like Austin is a very self-selecting place. And it's a place to me that, is very welcoming and accepting of all types of people. And so I think, the more we can do to just let citizens not be overly regulated by the government, that's going to help in terms of where businesses choose to locate, where, housing opportunities are, like I said, on schools. I think if we, have greater opportunities to make all of our schools better, that's going to create, more economic, socioeconomic, and other kinds of diversity in all parts of Austin.
But I think someone might argue that the schools in Southwest Austin and the schools in District 8, they have great reputations. So they're already there, and if you were to make the other schools great, then that would essentially, I guess you're saying, make people want to leave and be where those schools are, or be okay to move to different parts of town.
Yeah, I'm saying, I think that right now, it's like, and this isn't unique to Austin, I'm just saying, I think that it would create greater opportunity in both directions. Like, you might have more people that might be inclined and, to say, well, hey, we want to be in a different part of Austin, or people who are, not currently in Southwest Austin say, hey, you know, there's an opportunity here for us. That's what I mean. It's just like greater mobility and movement of people, and you know, all across the city.
Yeah. Tell our viewers, you know, why they should elect you over Paige Ellis.
Sure. Well, first of all, you know, I look at, you know, the two choices that they have, and I think, you know, Paige is, I've gotten to know her on the trail and, you know, respect her, and I think I can tell you, anybody who runs for office after the, you know, the experience I've had on the trail, I have immense respect for it, because it is not easy. But I think, you know, it's very clear to me that my focus is more on tackling the affordability crisis in a way that is very tangible and is achievable. I think right now, and I said it the other night at a forum at City Hall, you know, if we move away from having even one voice on City Council who's going to really challenge how we're spending taxpayer dollars and how we're, you know, implementing policies, you know, I think it's going to harm the city in the short and long term. I mean, you talk about diversity of opinion, you talk about having dissent. There's an opportunity here to have a voice of reason at City Hall, to talk, you know, about issues in a way that, you know, I've said time and time again, I think there's a silent majority across Austin, and it's not really about, you know, party politics. You know, it's not Republican or Democrat. It was a point of pride to me during the general election, where you would find my signs in the yards of, you know, Ted Cruz supporters and Beto supporters, and nobody else can say that. You know, I'm somebody that I think bridges the gap. I'm a consensus builder, and I'm somebody who, you know, doesn't want to play party politics. What I want to do is fix problems. And so right now, you know, when you look at, you know, the focus of my campaign versus my opponent's campaign, you know, I'm very, very determined to get our taxes down, to fix traffic, to address the kind of bureaucratic red tape that's costing businesses and families and driving them out of the city. You know, I'm so in favor of preserving the public safety realm that we have here, and making sure that our citizens feel safe, making sure that people want to keep coming here, not only to live, but to visit. And, you know, in our parks, I mean, I've got experience that my opponent just simply lacks. I mean, you know, talk about, you know, the environment. I mean, I think people in Austin, you know, are very, very committed to our parks and open spaces. Well, I'm a commissioner for our Parks and Rec Board, and I have relevant experience. I'm a conservationist, and I find that, you know, there is a balance to be had, and I think I can achieve it, where, you know, people are going to keep coming, and we need to accommodate that. But there's a way to develop so that we don't encroach on our parks and our open spaces, but we still accommodate the growth that's coming. And I think in all those ways, you know, I've got experience. Like I said, in government and politics, I've got experience helping to grow a small business. And I love this city, and I feel like my passion for this place, I'm going to work incredibly hard on behalf of our citizens to get things done that need to get done.
You know, obviously it's a nonpartisan body, the City Council, but I think
apparently
it is supposed to be. And so, but I think we cannot ignore the fact that you would be replacing, if you win, the lone conservative Republican voice on the council. You're the only Republican who ran in this district. You have to then see some value in having that voice on the City Council.
Oh, of course. I don't think there's any question. I think what I was getting at, Ashley, is that I think it says a lot that, you know, in my campaign, you rarely hear me refer to being a Republican, and I am, and, you know, happy to embrace that. But my opponent regularly talks about being a Democrat and being a progressive, and I think, you know, what I'm saying is, look, this is city government, and this is a nonpartisan race for what is supposed to be a nonpartisan body. And only one of us, I think, is really focused on the issues that matter to the people of Southwest Austin. And another one of us is just focused on basically how best to separate. I mean, I have support across the board. I cannot tell you how many Democrats I've spoken to in my district in Southwest Austin who want to support me. And in part it's because, you know, not only they look at my stand on property taxes and wanting to reform that, but it's also that they see, well, you're it. Like, if we don't have, you know, one lone voice to, you know, to just ask some questions and to, you know, bring a diversity of thought or opinion, you know, we've got this monolithic block where things are just going to go through without a lot of debate. And I think it says a great deal that, you know, people across the political spectrum see the value in that. And so for me, I want to run as a uniter. I want to run as somebody that's just recognizing what are the needs of the people in Austin. And, you know, insane rise in property taxes is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's a human issue. And it's something I feel very passionately about getting under control. And we can. There's still time, but we need to, I think, vote with our heads and our hearts. And so I'm encouraging people to do that and to vote for me, because I believe I've got the right experience to tackle these problems and to work with my colleagues on city council if I'm so fortunate.